much wiser since my goodbye to you.
Greetings from Castle Goring, from Nikki, Aurora, and from me. Well, the Christmas season is really digging in, and I am digging in early with it because with everything that's going on here, I have to get in the Christmas spirit. So not only have I had to get into it, I'm showing it. Don't you see? I'm red and green and dressed up like the Christmas tree. And incidentally, for what it's worth, the lights on the Christmas tree are not blue. They are blue, red, green, and amber. And for some reason, they photograph as blue. Don't ask me why. So, having made that point, oh, Aurora, did you just do a little belchy-welchy? But before anything else, if I may, I'd like to say quantum entanglement. Santa, I know, is watching, and Santa loves those flowers, and so do I. So thank you very much. Now, to return to the question. ABL says, I have to tell you, the BBC ran its lunchtime news with the Prince Andrew spy story over a half-an-hour period today. I was absolutely astonished at the amount of coverage they gave it. What, in your opinion, is the significance of this? Well, it's much ado about nothing. But of course, we need to remember the BBC is not particularly pro-monarchist, nor is this government, although this government is not the government that initiated the whole procedure, because the supposed spy is no more a spy than any Western businessman who is a member of the ruling party, goes and does business, and of course has connections back home as well. The whole thing is a total cook-up, calculated not only to damage Prince Andrew, but to exploit Prince Andrew's vulnerabilities and use his existence as a battering ram with which to also skewer the Chinese. This is all very political, and it's all really rather murky, and it's also ridiculous, not only on the face of it, but in actuality. This was a prominent Chinese businessman who was even given the right of abode in this country until, of course, it didn't suit the government anymore. You know, our governments, not only this government, the previous government, they have both turned out to be shockingly dishonourable. Inviting in foreigners to invest in this country, then when the political climate changes, seizing private citizens' assets. I'm sorry. It is disgusting behaviour. Now, Prince Andrew, remember, was the trade ambassador, basically, for the British nation for years. He has excellent connections, not only with the Chinese, but with all sorts of other countries with which we trade. He was made to stand down after the Jeffrey Epstein business started, but he had the connections and he has continued to use them. Not only privately for his own benefit, but for the benefit of the country. Two separate things. Well, he was commercially in bed with this man, and this man obviously, it became convenient for the previous government to zero in on him. I mean, what access would Prince Andrew have that would be of overriding use to a spy? Is he going to take him for a tour of GCHQ? Is he going to reveal our armaments, non-existent as they almost are, to a spy? I mean, the whole thing is so beyond ridiculous. It is laughable, except it's not a joke. When the late Queen was alive, she even sent Prince Andrew to represent her and the country, to commiserate with the Chinese ambassador over the COVID crisis. Now, MI5 claimed that they discovered that the businessman, who's aged 50, was a member of the Chinese Communist Party. Well, I mean, if businessmen in this country can't be members of the ruling party or the opposition, I mean, excuse me. And that he was working for the United Front Work Department, which gathers intelligence. I mean, what intelligence of any consequence would Prince Andrew have to give to a spy? I mean, the whole thing is so ludicrous. But this is where Prince Andrew is being used yet again, because the BBC has a run with the story. They're trying to make it into a huge deal. The government is trying to make it into a huge deal to deflect attention away from their ineptitude and their unpopularity. It's a diversionary tactic. Prince Andrew has betrayed his country by being commercially in bed with a spy. So we, the government, can get our BBC henchmen to hammer him practically into the ground. And that's going to deflect attention away from all the not only cock-ups that we, the government, are doing, but all the encroachments that we have already instituted in terms of people's civil liberties, because everybody's going to be so distracted by Prince Andrew, the traitor to the country's interests, by being commercially involved with a spy. I can go into this in greater detail if you would like, but I think that pretty much gets the point across. So I'm prepared to go into greater detail if you like, but otherwise I think enough is enough. I mean, the idea, it's, are people supposed to be so dumb that they believe every cock and bull story put out by a government or the mainstream media on behalf of its political cronies? I ask you, just ridiculous. Ms. Fish and Chips says, "Hello, Lady C. When King Charles III went to Berlin and spoke in German, he said how happy he was to be there, especially because he had just become a new grandfather for the 4th time. Do you think, therefore, in highlighting the birth of Archie, that the king was providing assurance that Archie was born of Meghan's body and not via a surrogate? Oh, there are 3 parts to this question, so I will just stick to each one and do each one at a time. No. At the time of Archie's birth, my information is that the news of the doubts of Archie's delivery, whether it was by FedEx or the stork or some other means, had not spread that widely yet, that there would have been any need for Prince Charles, as he then was, to make any allusion that would be saving face and presenting as a fig leaf. He simply stated the fact that his son Harry's baby had been born, making him a grandfather for the 4th time. He never said anything about Meghan. He never said anything about any questions as to that had arisen as a result of Meghan's conduct in regards to the fact that she had, or indeed had not, borne the child. There was no need to make the allusion, and he didn't actually make the allusion. He simply made the statement of fact, which was that his son Harry's son had been born. As simple as that. Linda Thompson says, considering surrogacy is a new procedure and technically have eggs of Meghan's body, could the law of the body be changed? Oh, it can, that any law can be changed, but you can't have the law being made retroactive unless it's going to call into question the whole legal system of the country. Retroactive law is regarded justifiably as bad law. So, any child born to any married couple in this country via surrogacy, if the child is born in this country and the child was not born of the body of the woman who gave birth to it, it is illegitimate. If you change the law to state that a child born of the sperm and ovum of a married couple is legitimate, irrespective of who carries the child, that is something that could be ongoing for the future. But it couldn't, I'm afraid, be reversed to legitimize any child that had been born illegitimate as a result of the way the law stood at the time. I hope that makes it clear. Optimistic Gal says, if adopted, where would they fit the line of succession? Or did I miss that? All confusion. Well, it's not really confusing at all, actually, Optimistic Gal. It couldn't be simpler. Adopted children are not able to be in the line of succession. It's as simple as that. Whether they were born legitimately or illegitimately or not, they cannot be in the line of succession. Now, what is really interesting is if a child is born to, say, the Duke of North and his wife, the Duchess of North, gave birth to it and it's their child, and they adopt that child out to, say, the Prince of Wales. The Prince of Wales can have the child given another title, but when the Duke of North dies, that child, if it is the heir to the Duke of North, becomes the Duke of North, even though it has been adopted by someone else. It is legally entitled to the status of Duke of North. It's really very simple. What happens at birth cannot be altered, even by adoption. Which means that if the child is born illegitimate, even though it is legitimized, it is still not having been born legitimate. So I hope that doesn't confuse the issue further, but answers it and clarifies it. Complexities, my dear, but everything in life is really very simple. No matter how complex the situation is, as you pick it to pieces, it's very simple. Nancy says, yes, it is ironic. Harry wanted to leave the royal family to get out of the news, and marrying Meghan, that's all they do. She really conned him. Oh, but did she? Did Harry really want to be out of the news? Or did Harry simply want to be in the news the way he wants to be in the news? Because Harry is on record as saying that he knew that he had only until his brother's children were adults to make his mark, and he was eager to do so. So that tells you right there that Harry had no intention of ever stepping out of the limelight. That means he was never going to step out of the news. So, did she con him? Possibly. Well, I think she certainly sold him a bill of goods that he bought that turned out to be, well, the bill of goods she sold him was 24 carats, and it turned out that it's not even 24 carat plated, it's brass. So to that extent, she will have conned him, because she promised him that they could leave. They would be bigger than William and Catherine. They would have the world. William and Catherine would only have Britain and the Commonwealth, but they'd have the rest of the world. And look, we're so popular. Look at how popular we were in Australia, quite forgetting that the newspapers had bigged them up. So at the very moment they were complaining about the newspapers having it in for them, the newspapers were pumping them up and they were believing their press. So, did he collude with her, or did she con him? I think he was collusive up to here. I don't think for a second that she conned him beyond making both of them believe that their folie à deux, their fantasy, was reality. We're going to be the biggest things in the world. You think we're the most popular couple in the royal family now? Wait until we leave. And also, we're not going to have to worry about submitting bills, and I'm going to be able to keep all the freebies I want, and I'm going to be able to get my people to get in touch with all of the designers that I want and give me designer items instead of what we're doing at the moment, where it's all so difficult, and it's really difficult for me to use my gluey hands and get things to stay with the opposition of all those goody two-shoed men in grey suits. Maria Gillinson says, "Oh dear Lady Colin Campbell. At one point he accused his wife, quote unquote, she took presents. I can't help that. Netanyahu will blame anyone rather than take responsibility. Such a coward." Well, that's one way of looking at it. He's fighting for his freedom, not only his political survival, but his freedom to stay out of prison. Of course, he's going to tar everybody with the brush. And his wife is a convenient pin. Well, no, she's a convenient hook upon which, he can pin his rectitude and any mistakes that they made, she made, and he didn't. It's really interesting, though, with all that's going on in that part of the world at the moment, that the Israeli state is still trying him. I wonder how that's going to pan out. It will be very interesting to see what happens in the next few weeks. Maybe he knows he's going to get off. Who knows? Maybe the Israeli legal system is as accommodating as other democracies' legal systems are to those politicians, I should say, or those leaders, or those in authority whom the judges decide are actually good guys, even if they're so corrupt that they then have to invent foreign states, creating misinformation that turns out to be no foreign state misinformation, but actual proper information. Oh dear. Are we mentioning Hunter's laptop? No, we're not going to mention Hunter's laptop. And isn't it wonderful? Hunter is going to be able to spend the rest of his life free until he is subpoenaed and asked awkward questions, and he's either then going to have to dish up his friends or see the inside of a federal penitentiary. Oh, poor Hunter. My heart bleeds for him. Personally, I would say, actually, I think a degree of flexibility in all states is called for. So I'm not so sure that I am absolutely crazy about punitiveness. Having said that, what I find interesting about the situation in the Middle East at the moment, where Israel and Syria are concerned, is that people who support Israel say, oh, Israel has a right to protect itself, and therefore it has a right to go into neighboring countries and eliminate any threat that it perceives to its existence that might repose in that foreign territory. Then, on the other hand, the very same people who think that that is a principle that should be applied in this instance then say, oh, but that principle, sound as it is in the Middle East, should not apply where Russia's existential threat from being encircled and having missiles pointing it in its direction would be concerned. The wild inconsistency, the total double standards, the jumping through hoops is what I find interesting. And how, oh, it's good for the goose, but not for the gander. What does that say about people's understanding of principle and putting principles before personalities? I just ask that for what it's worth. Reality Check says, Dear Lady C, does Great Britain have statutes of limitation for criminal acts? It seems to me, if, big if, Earl Spencer was sexually assaulted as a youth, time should be out for anything to be done about it. No, we do not have a statute of limitations for serious crimes. So we're not America. And you notice in America how they managed to get around that by passing a law that said, well, yes, the statute of limitations applies, but you have a window of opportunity of 3 months, 3 days, 3 weeks, whatever, to file a complaint because we're going to allow it. I mean, total bending of the law in the most unacceptable way possible. Because if the law can't be relied upon, what is its purpose? But so no, any complaint Charles Spencer has made about anybody, and he did make a complaint in a book, and the person of whom he complained has been questioned by the police. Let's see what happens there. I think the person in question is about 80 years old, but let's see what happens there. Because, of course, all sorts of other questions arise then. Is there corroborative evidence? No. To what extent would it be her word against his? Seems to be to a large extent. Is this a case worth pursuing under those nebulous circumstances? There's a lot that the Crown Prosecution Service and the police would have to consider before charging any old woman with a crime for something that appeared in a book by a journalist with a great knack for grabbing headlines. Let's not forget his performance at his sister's funeral. And it was a performance. Chipu says, I'm sorry, but the analysis on Charles Spencer is crass and insensitive. Bad girl! Unless you've been something abused, and I'm not going to repeat the word because this is YouTube, as a child, you simply cannot speak. Highly inappropriate. It was brave, not undignified. This is undignified. Bad girl. Well, I'm afraid, my dear Chippu, I don't for a second buy your stance. And with due respect, I do not feel that your remonstration is appropriate in the circumstances. You have no means of knowing that your supposition, where I'm concerned, would have any accuracy whatsoever, number one. So you've just made an assumption, which could be false. I'm not saying it is, but I'm saying it could be. I'm just laying out a few facts since maybe not for you to consider, but other people can consider them. If people couldn't comment on the consequences of bitter opportunism in older people who should know better, and if what happened to you as a child is an excuse, and that the only people who can actually comment on the matter are those who endured a similar fate, you clearly have no concept of, first of all, what entitles people to comment. Secondly, you clearly have no concept of the fact that just because somebody suffered as a child doesn't give them license as an adult to try to destroy other people's lives, or to recklessly endanger other people's lives, or to grab for sympathy for themselves when they don't deserve it, or to excuse 50 or 60 years of bad behaviour on the grounds that something happened to them when they were a child. I'm sorry. My, shall we say, upbringing was far harder and more odious than Charles Spencer's, and I have not behaved like the jerk that he has behaved as repeatedly over the decades. I speak from personal experience, by the way, where he's concerned. The guy was a jerk and still is a jerk, in my opinion. And if you think because he's now blaming something that happened to him as a teenager, that doubtless at the time he was delighted about, and he's now decided it works well for him in another way, and that's his excuse for damaging several people's lives over the decades, well, good for you. You obviously have a totally different concept of right and wrong and good and bad than I do, and thank God mine doesn't accord with yours. And you thought he was brave to excuse his behaviour. Excuse me, loads of people have had far worse happen to them than Charles Spencer has had happen to him, and they haven't behaved as badly and as systematically badly as he has behaved over the decades. So that's my take on it. And you think it's undignified? You're absolutely entitled to your opinion. And I'm not trying to dissuade you from your opinion. I'm simply pointing out to you that you have the right to your opinion and I have the right to mine. And I think that mine is better than yours. You don't? Fine. What you are suggesting is that anybody who has had anything traumatic, and his certainly wasn't traumatic at the time. It was exceedingly pleasurable. Let's remember that all of a sudden they have the right to behave for the rest of their lives as if they're jerks. What can I tell you? Good luck to you. Good luck to you. Fortunately, I take a different view. And I don't excuse my bad behaviour on anything that happened to me when I was a child. But I'm delighted to see that you think that other people's bad behaviour should be excused on those grounds. So much for personal responsibility. QPR says, I see yesterday you tweeted about President-elect Trump calling out President Biden for escalating the war in Ukraine. Can you please elaborate? Well, I don't know that there's much elaboration that's required. I'm delighted to see that President Trump has called out the escalation of the war in Ukraine, because I think it's dangerous. Of course, it also has the objective of destroying Ukraine further, which will allow Carillion or Monsanto, all the BlackRock companies to not only supply further weapons, but to rebuild that which they have made the Ukrainian people have to pay for to destroy. Yeah, really noble, very noble of President Biden. If indeed President Biden is competent enough to have made the decision, because there's some doubt, in fairness to him, as to whether he would be competent enough to make the decision. But whoever made the decision, very profitable. And I'm delighted that President Trump has called it out, because it sends a message, and it sends a very clear message to the rest of the world, that Donald Trump wants peace. And those who think that peace is terrible, why don't you go and live in Ukraine, or in Syria, or in Iraq, or in Lebanon, or in Gaza, or in Libya, or in any of the other countries where foreign adventurism has wrought havoc? I'm in favour of peace, and I don't care who thinks that I'm wrong. I think peace is infinitely preferable to war, especially nowadays when there is such ability to knock out all of the recent advances of civilization. Because do you think we're the only ones who have the ability to knock out the internet, etc., etc.? Because if you do, that's extremely naive of you. And I know most of the people who are listening to this do not think that, well, let me put it this way. I think most people who are a part of this community are like-minded. They want peace rather than war. And they want the benefits of civilization rather than the consequences of uncivilized warfare. Lauren R. says, Lady C, did you ever meet, and we're going to end on a much lighter note, okay? Did you ever meet Aline, Countess of Romanones? or read her fictionalized autobiographies about her life as an, oh, Aurora, you're itching me. Aurora's fur is blowing near me. Okay, I love you. About her life as an OSS CIA spy. What did you think of her, and do you know whether the rumours about her books being greatly over-exaggerated have any merit? Thank you for your show. I've been a listener from the very beginning during the COVID lockdowns. Thank you for that, Lauren. I didn't know Aline Romanones. She was originally Aline Quintanilla. Well, when I say originally, she was Aline Griffiths. She was an American model, and they say that I have read her books, by the way. Oh, I think The Spy Wore Red was one. I read them ages ago. Very lightweight. She certainly had it in for Gloria Guinness, who she made out was a Nazi spy, because Gloria and she were great competitors. And Gloria was actually more beautiful, richer, and more stylish, but they were both the creme de la creme, let's put it that way. And she made out that Gloria had been a spy and that Gloria was a dyed-in-the-wool Nazi, blah, blah, blah. Well, I don't see how she could have been a dyed-in-the-wool Nazi when she married an Egyptian, but there we go. I used to see her at parties, but we were not friends. Aline Romanones was much older than I was, and her children were my age. But when I was young, in the late 60s, early 70s, living in New York, they used to have nice young girls sort of filling out these parties. And I was one of them. And she was often at things. She was extremely glamorous. She was very grandly married. She was a great friend of the Duchess of Windsor, who counted for a huge deal in New York, well, really American and actually international society. The Duke and Duchess of Windsor counted for a huge deal. They weren't like Harry and Meghan. They were not pariahs the way Harry and Meghan are pariahs. People didn't avoid them. People actually relished being in their company. And Aline Romanones was a great friend of the Duchess of Windsor. It was said that the marriage was her marriage with the Conde de Quintanilla, who then became the Count of Romanones, that he had interests in other directions, but they had children and they had a very civilized dynastic relationship. Her autobiographies are supposed, really her memoirs, I think you'd say, are supposed to be possibly heavily fictionalized to make the part she played as a spy more important. But there seems to have been some truth to her basic claims. To what extent they were exaggerated, who knows? I mean, I have no means of knowing. I wasn't even thought of at the time that she was writing about. And she chose her moment well, because she chose to write her books pretty much after everybody was dead. So not only could nobody verify whether her claims were exaggerated, but they also couldn't exonerate her. So, but she evidently seems to have been a bit of a spy. But spy not along the lines of Guy Burgess, let's put it that way. You know, she was, I think she sort of embroidered, but you never know, you never know. The books were entertaining, and I mean, I have seen so much unlikely happen in my life and around me happen that, you know, they say truth is stranger than fiction, and it often is. Fiction has to be modified, it has to be made greyer so that it is believable, while the truth is often less believable. It's often unbelievable because it's so bizarre. And I don't really know. The books were interesting. They were she was a gorgeous looking woman when she was younger. And I saw her, I mean, she died about 10 years ago, I think. She died quite recently. I mean, time at my age isn't quite what it was when I was younger. But she died relatively recently. She was very old. She still had a good figure. Her eyebrows were a little bit too bushy, but putting that aside, she was still very well preserved. But she was not a great beauty the way Gloria Guinness was. And I think she waited until poor Gloria Guinness was dead to put the boot in posthumously in a way that she was never able to prevail with when Gloria Guinness was alive. So I hope that answers the question, and I hope we have ended on a slightly lighter and more entertaining note. Okay? Thank you so much. Take good care. I hope you have enjoyed this. If you have, please remember to keep the questions and comments coming in so I will know what subjects you would like us to be addressing. Okay? Godspeed. And if you have truly enjoyed this, would you care to like, share, subscribe, press the notification bell, and see you tomorrow, hopefully. Bye-bye.